Hey guys, Baos and Ramos, and the Miami Dolphins were active this weekend in the trade market, and some trades, plural trades. There was 2 trades, big time trades here, and one of them was somewhat expected, but not exactly what maybe Dolphin fans were expecting in the trade, and then the other one was just completely out of the blue. But after the first move, the Dolphins were in the market for this player, and they kick a bucket on a player, and let's see what happens. But let's start with the first one, and that is the Dolphins trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Miami Dolphins agreed on a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers to send Minkah Fitzpatrick and a 2027 fifth-round pick in exchange for Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and a 2027 seventh-round pick. So, all in all, pretty cool trade for the Miami Dolphins. It was expected that Jonnu was rumored to, be on the way to Pittsburgh. And that's been pretty much the offseason talk for a while there. Ramsey wanted out, and they were, exploring trade options. He was possibly going to go back to LA. Who would have known? But he ends up in Pittsburgh, and the Miami Dolphins get back a former safety that they drafted in Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think this is a pretty cool trade. Now, do I love the fact that, you have someone who is coming back into your building? Obviously a new building than what they were in before, since the Miami Dolphins had relocated their training facility. But coming back into your building, who wasn't the best sport when he was in there, and demanded a trade out mid-season, 2 games into the season. That is just hard for me to wrap my hand around. I remember the whole saga. It was not fun to observe, but we're here now, and I have nothing but good words for Minkah Fitzpatrick, the player. I think he's a tremendous playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, and I think it's very much needed to get slightly younger in the position. You trade away a 30-year-old cornerback, Jalen Ramsey, who's arguably one of the best corners in the NFL, even at this ripe age of 30. Meanwhile, you get in return a 28-year-old safety who, let's be honest, last year was not his best year, but in previous years, he's almost been a Pro Bowl each and every year for the Steelers team. So hopefully he can bring a little bit more of that production back with him to Miami. I think that'll be absolutely cool. I think his first season and 2 games in Miami were pretty spectacular, and I'm hoping he brings a little bit more of that. Aside from that, the departure of Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith is not great. We'll start off with Jalen Ramsey. When he first came to the Dolphins, super high expectations. The pairing of him and Xavier Howard was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the best cornerback duo in the NFL. On the flip side of the ball, they have the best wide receiver duel, fastest wide receiver duel in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So the sky was the limit for this Dolphins secondary with him and Xavier Howard there. Things went a little awry. Xavier Howard, just things couldn't get going well with him. Meanwhile, Jalen Ramsey hit the ground running, especially when he was coming off an injury. Unfortunately, he got injured in training camp, was able to come back, was an explosive playmaker on the defensive side of the ball the second he came back. So, nothing but high praise for him. I think he's an absolute stud of a defensive player. And, even at 30 years old, still being a pretty dominant corner. And that's, something people struggle to wrap their head around is this is a young man's game. And when you gotta have a guy's 30, 29 years old still keeping up with a lot of these like 24-year-olds, it's something to behold. You did see a loss in the step last year, especially against a good rookie wide receiver last year in Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Jalen Ramsey. He cooked them a couple times. And those are certain things that, you look at and you have to evaluate and say, is this going to be a problem moving forward? Then you had fuel to the fire with Jalen Ramsey requesting a trade out of Miami. So I see no harm, no foul there. I think what the Dolphins got out of him in their initial, pull for him was pretty well. And he worked his end of the bargain. Dolphins did not deliver on, being a successful and postseason contending, Super Bowl contending team. And that's what Jalen Ramsey was expecting. And Dolphins didn't live up to the end of the bargain there. And, to no one's fault, it is what it is. Things happen. In terms of Jonnu Smith, it's really sad to see him go. I do think his production value was insane last year, and the fact that the Dolphins aren't able to, keep him pleased, keep him at the contract that get him to a contract that he wants, and a more long-term deal. He is a local guy. I have a soft spot for that when it comes to players in the Dolphins who are from Miami or local. Anyone who's South Florida, that's pretty much Broward and below. They're from here, and they're a pretty good player, and they come to the Dolphins. I have a soft spot for them. But aside from that, Jonnu Smith arguably had the best year of his career. So in hindsight, Dolphins are trading at sky-high market value. We can just go and look at some of his stats overall his career. Last year, arguably his best career season. He had 88 receptions off of 111 targets. Both of those are career highs. Same for his yardage, 884. Same thing for his touchdowns, 8 touchdowns. So absolutely stellar career season for Jonnu Smith. Hopefully he does well in Pittsburgh. I'm hoping for him to do well. Really, really cool guy, and I'm really happy, that, hopefully he can facilitate a deal in Pittsburgh and stay there a little bit more long term and find somewhere that will truly value him. Because unfortunately for him, the last couple of seasons he's been bouncing around teams. After leaving Tennessee, he went to New England. Then he went to ATL for a year. Then Miami for a year. And Miami for a year, not by his own choice. They traded him out. Meanwhile, Jalen Ramsey, there was definitely a slight drop-off in his performance, but at the same time, pretty up there with his previous year in 2022 in LA. So I'm not too biased in terms of saying that Darren Ramsey did not have a good season. In terms of performance, Minkah Fitzpatrick also coming off career year. So I think this was a win-win trade for all teams involved. You have Jonnu Smith coming off one of his best career years, and they're trying to build something offensively there in Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf. So I do think Pittsburgh is making a big culture shift there. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and Pat Freiermuth as the tight ends there, and what that could entail for fantasy football. If you do have either one of those guys in like dynasty leagues or you already drafted, definitely keep an eye on for what, who's going to be the main dog there in terms of receiving tight end. If I had to put my money on it, it would probably be Freiermuth. He's a younger guy, but definitely a key piece in terms of actually playing and not just about fantasy. Jonnu Smith to the Steelers, big time. In terms of the Dolphins, Minkah Fitzpatrick, at first wasn't really too pleased to be welcoming him back, just in the fan of me, but the person who evaluates players and sees how they play on the field each and every week, he's a guy who is a stud, and he's going to come after the ball on the defensive side of the ball, and you absolutely love to see that, and I think it helps build up this Dolphins defense, which a lot of people are overlooking and saying, they're not going to be a great defense. So I do think it's cool that the Dolphins got a little bit younger in corner and, added very much valued experience in the safety position, which should make things interesting, especially with the loss of Javon Holland. Not too happy about that. But there was other news that came out following that. The Dolphins were in the market for a tight end. They were searching, and they landed on retired Darren Waller. They made a trade, a 2026 sixth-rounder to the New York Giants for a 2027 seventh-round pick and Darren Waller. And then on top of that, Darren Waller is coming out of retirement and agreeing to a one-year deal with the Dolphins worth up to $5 million. So, honestly, Dolphins addressed the hole immediately as they opened it up almost. And, those are certain things that I do like to see from the Dolphins front office is they were aggressive. There were talks about other possible available tight ends like Michael Mayer from the Raiders. And the Dolphins actively pursued whatever possible options they had at the tight end position. And I like where they landed at with Darren Waller. He hasn't been in the league for the last year, so definitely not something that you see in a typical big-time move by teams in general, but the Dolphins here. But they're trying to see what could be a good fit. Now, Darren Waller came out and said 3 months ago on an interview with John Gruden that there's only two coaches he'll play for. It's John Gruden and Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith.
Is there any chance you'd come back and play?
Nah.
What if I got a coaching job? Would you come back and play for me?
The only two people I will listen to, I will say, is you and Frank Smith are the only two people I will hear out and give them my ear.
Miami doesn't throw it to the tight end, man. You ain't going down there.
They got sports cars down there, man. They got everybody down there running 4-3. You gotta.
No doubt you fit in good with that crowd.
So that was about 3 months ago, and it didn't get heavily publicized until the trade actually happened. So yes, people could have speculated that this was a possibility, but this was not really on anyone's radar. Let's be real. But I do like the move. Darren Waller, under Frank Smith's guidance, had his career best seasons back in 2019 and 2020. Both years, he had 90 plus receptions, over 115 targets in both seasons, and surpassed 1,100 yards each and every season those 2 years. And then in 2020, had the bigger breakout year with the 9 touchdowns. So I do believe, the Dolphins could possibly unlock a certain level of that. Now, is he going to match those totals? I don't think so. I do think the weapon array for the Dolphins offense is a little bit different than what the Raiders had, and he's not going to be option number 1, 2, or probably even 3. So those are the things that you have to be concerned about in terms of maybe drafting him for fantasy. But honestly, could be a pretty good late round pickup, end of draft type of pickup for Darren Waller there in terms of fantasy. But as far as the player goes and what he means to the Dolphins, I think he's going to bring a level of physicality at the tight end position that is going to help replace what Jonnu brought. On top of that, he is freaking huge. You want to know how huge? He's 6'6". In football talk, that is pretty freaking big, all right? And at the tight end position, he's able to, he has really long arms, so he's really able to have a high catch radius, and that's going to be a big-time difference for Tua and the Miami Dolphins passing game. And I just think it brings a different element and something of a big body that the Dolphins have been lacking for a really long time. Now, you can argue that Jonnu Smith was a big body last year. He's not big in terms of height and size overall as Darren Waller is. Meanwhile, Jonnu Smith is just more compact, but, pretty reliable. And that's the thing I'm definitely going to miss from Jonnu, but happy to get someone like Darren Waller who didn't get the best rep in New York, dealt with some injuries, and decided to hang him up. But the fact that he's willing to come out of retirement and play for the Dolphins, there is speculation, he's trying to get his clout up and he's trying to, progress his rap career and pretty much, live in Miami for a year or X, Y, and Z. It is what it is. As long as he shows up to work and balls out, I think that's going to be, it's going to match what happens on the field. And that if that's the case, then, that's great for the Miami Dolphins. Otherwise, it is what it is. The Dolphins are taking a slight risk, sending a 6th-round pick, and getting a 7th-round pick in return for Waller. I think that's a pretty good trade in my eyes, and the risk definitely doesn't outweigh the reward that could be at the end of the season and what it could bring with possible contributions from him. So all in all, I do think both of these trades are win-win situations for Miami Dolphins. Got younger on the defense side of the ball. Unfortunately, the big loss in terms of the Steeler trade was getting rid of Jonnu. Really wish the Dolphins could have kept on Jonnu. And then this was a facilitation in terms of trading for Waller when you lost Jonnu there. So, I'm glad the Dolphins kept their options open and were able to progress and, move off of Ramsey. Unfortunately, he wanted out. So not really much I can say there. It's just unfortunate. I think he's an absolute playmaker and, going to miss him on the defense side of the ball. Really loved seeing him play for the Dolphins. And, same thing for Jonnu Smith. And then in terms of Darren Waller, let's just hope that he can bring the same levels that he previously had when being led by Frank Smith. So those are my opinions and what I think of these two trades. Let me know what you guys think down below. Really would appreciate your guys' feedback, and I'll get you guys in the next one. Peace.